In 1982, a visionary film arrived in theaters, and audiences walked out confused. Blade Runner was too slow, too dark, and too strange for its time. Yet decades later, this supposed failure became the most influential science fiction film ever made, reshaping how we imagine the future itself. What transformed this box office disaster into a cinematic masterpiece? The answer lies in 20 shocking production secrets that prove sometimes the greatest art emerges from absolute chaos. Number 1. Tears in Rain was mostly improvised. Let's start with the moment that defines the entire film. Rutger Hauer's legendary death monologue.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe wasn't in the original script. The night before filming, Hauer sat alone in his trailer, rewrote the entire speech, and added the now iconic line, "like tears in rain." He cut several flowery phrases, tightening it into something raw and haunting. When Ridley Scott saw the take, he knew immediately they'd captured lightning. Years later, Scott would call it the soul of the entire film. One actor, one night, one rewrite, and cinema history changed forever. Number 2. The original novel barely resembles the movie. Here's something that shocks first-time readers. Philip K. Dick's source novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, is wildly different from the film. The book explores bizarre religion, empathy boxes that connect humanity psychically, and a television show hosted by a man who doesn't exist. There's an entire subplot about owning real animals versus fake ones as status symbols. The movie strips away most of this philosophical weirdness, keeping only the core bounty hunter premise and the question of what makes us human. Dick initially worried the adaptation had lost his vision, but after seeing early footage, he wept with gratitude, realizing Scott had captured something even deeper. Number 3. Deckard almost had a voice like a noir detective. Harrison Ford hated the narration from day one. In the original theatrical cut, Deckard speaks in classic film noir style, hard-boiled, cynical, explaining everything. Ford recorded it believing the voiceover was temporary, a placeholder, but executives panicked after test screenings, convinced audiences wouldn't understand the plot without hand-holding. They forced Ford back into the studio to record a flatter, more resigned version. Ford later admitted he deliberately delivered it poorly, hoping they'd scrap the idea entirely. They didn't. The narration stayed for years until Ridley Scott finally removed it in the director's cut, letting the visuals speak for themselves. Number 4. The studio thought the film was too smart. Warner Brothers executives watched early test screenings with growing horror. Audiences sat in confused silence. Comment cards complained the film was too slow, too ambiguous, too intellectual. Panic set in. Studio heads demanded 2 major changes: add explanatory narration throughout, and tack on a happy ending showing Deckard and Rachel driving into beautiful countryside. Ridley Scott fought both changes tooth and nail, but he'd gone massively over budget and lost leverage. The compromised theatrical version released in 1982 satisfied no one. Not Scott, not Ford, and definitely not audiences. It would take decades before Scott could restore his original vision. Number 5. The pigeon scene was shot in one take. Rutger Hauer's final moment, when his character Roy Batty releases a white dove, required perfect timing. They had one shot, one take, one bird. Hauer held the pigeon gently, delivered his death speech, and released it on cue. The dove flew straight up into the studio rafters because the rain machines had soaked its wings, making it heavy and disoriented. The unexpected awkward flight actually enhanced the scene's strangeness, adding an almost dreamlike quality. Cinematographer Jordan Cronenweth captured it perfectly. That single, unrehearsed moment, filmed once, became one of cinema's most memorable images, disguised as genius. Number 6. Ford and Hauer barely spoke off camera. On set, Harrison Ford and Rutger Hauer maintained an odd distance. Not hostility, something stranger. Hauer deliberately isolated himself from the rest of the cast, staying in character even during breaks. He wanted to embody Roy Batty's alien presence, his superiority, his unpredictability. Ford respected the approach and kept his distance. Their few interactions crackled with tension that translated perfectly on screen. When they finally confronted each other in the climactic rooftop chase, that genuine unfamiliarity added raw energy. 2 actors who barely knew each other, circling like predators. The method worked brilliantly. Number 7. Real animal robots were too expensive. Here's delicious irony. In Blade Runner's world, Owning a real, living animal is the ultimate luxury. Most people own realistic mechanical replicas instead. The production team loved this detail so much they actually researched building functional robot animals for the set. Real animatronic creatures that could move convincingly. But 1982 technology couldn't deliver what they imagined, at least not within any reasonable budget. The costs were astronomical, so they settled for simple props and clever editing. The fictional future's technology was too advanced for the actual present to create. Number 8. The Tyrell Building was a miniature. That massive pyramid dominating the Los Angeles skyline? A physical model. But not some tiny desktop miniature. This was a gigantic detailed structure with thousands of individually placed tiny lights. The effects team built it using forced perspective techniques, making it appear even more colossal than its actual size. They filmed it using motion-controlled cameras that could repeat the same smooth movements perfectly, allowing multiple exposure passes for lights, smoke, and atmosphere. Every glowing window, every architectural detail, painstakingly handcrafted. No computers, no digital effects. Just craftsmen working at scales that made your hands cramp. Old-school movie magic at its absolute finest. Number 9. Sean Young learned origami for the role. Ridley Scott obsessed over tiny character details. He wanted replicants to have subtle habits, almost ritualistic behaviors that distinguish them from humans. So Sean Young spent weeks learning origami, practicing small, precise folds until the movements became automatic. Scott filmed her making a small unicorn, though the scene was ultimately cut. But Young incorporated those careful, deliberate hand movements throughout her performance as Rachel. Watch her handle objects, touch surfaces, adjust her hair. There's always a measured quality, as if she's consciously calculating each gesture. That's not just good acting. That's homework paying off in ways the audience feels without consciously recognizing. Number 10. The Neon City was built using scrap model parts. The futuristic Los Angeles skyline, with all its intricate architectural chaos, was constructed from literal garbage. The production design team scavenged broken plastic parts, old circuit boards, model airplane leftovers, random electronic components, and what modelers call greebles, meaningless detail pieces that add visual complexity. They glued thousands of these scraps onto building facades and street sets, creating texture and depth. Spray painted everything in industrial colors, added neon accents, and suddenly, trash became tomorrow. That's why Blade Runner's future feels so tactile, so real, because it's built from recognizable pieces of our actual world, just reassembled into something new. Number 11. The opening fireballs were real explosions. That haunting opening shot, the industrial hellscape with massive fireballs erupting into the night sky, wasn't created with visual effects. The production built an enormous soundstage representing a futuristic oil refinery, then detonated actual explosive charges in carefully timed sequences. They filmed it at high speed, so when played back at normal speed, the fireballs expanded in dreamy slow motion. The heat was intense, the timing critical. One take had to capture everything because resetting the explosives took hours. Cinematographer Jordan Cronenweth positioned cameras at multiple angles, capturing that apocalyptic beauty in one coordinated pyrotechnic ballet. Dangerous, expensive, and absolutely stunning. Number 12. Vangelis scored the film almost entirely solo. Greek composer Vangelis created Blade Runner's legendary soundtrack using a method that sounds impossible. He improvised. Most of the score was performed live, in single takes, playing multiple synthesizers simultaneously while watching footage. No orchestra, no sheet music. Just Vangelis alone in his studio, surrounded by keyboards, creating atmospheric layers in real time. He'd watch a scene, feel its rhythm, and compose on the spot. What you hear in the film is essentially a live jazz performance on synthesizers. This spontaneous approach gave the music an organic quality rare in electronic scores. It breathes, hesitates, and pulses like something alive. Number 13. Deckard's blaster was made from two guns. Harrison Ford's iconic weapon, that chunky, oversized pistol, was built by combining two real firearms. Prop master Danny Bilson took a Charter Arms Bulldog revolver and attached it to the receiver of a Steyr Mannlicher rifle. He added random electronic components, wires, and LED lights to suggest futuristic technology. The result looked heavy, industrial, and completely believable. Ford actually felt the weight every time he drew it, which affected how he moved and aimed. That prop weighs several pounds, and you can see Ford compensating for the heft in every action sequence. Real weight creates real performance. The best practical effects always work that way. Number 14. Ridley Scott added the unicorn because of another movie. The unicorn dream sequence, Deckard's brief vision of a white unicorn running through a forest, wasn't in the original theatrical release. Scott added it later using unused footage from his fantasy film Legend, which he'd just finished. The unicorn serves as a crucial clue to one of cinema's greatest mysteries. Is Deckard himself a replicant? When Gaff leaves a tiny origami unicorn at Deckard's apartment, it suggests Gaff knows Deckard's private dreams, implying they're implanted memories. This small addition transformed the entire film's meaning, sparking decades of passionate debate. Scott has confirmed his intention. Deckard is a replicant, but the beauty lies in the ambiguity. Number 15. The film's smoke was a nightmare. Ridley Scott had an obsession that nearly destroyed his crew's health. He wanted every single shot filled with atmosphere, not just outdoor scenes, but every alley, every interior, every single frame. Fog machines ran constantly on set. Smoke effects filled the air until you couldn't see 10 feet in front of you. Scott called it creating density, making the air itself visible and textured, turning empty space into something you could almost touch. For the crew, it was absolute torture. They worked 12-hour days, sometimes 16, breathing chemical haze constantly. The sound stages were sealed environments, and that artificial fog just accumulated, getting thicker as the day progressed. The consequences were real and lasting. Cinematographer Jordan Cronenweth developed severe respiratory problems during production that plagued him for years afterward. Harrison Ford complained endlessly about visibility issues, the constant irritation in his eyes and throat. Other crew members developed chronic coughs that lasted months after filming wrapped. Actors couldn't see their marks. Cameramen squinted through viewfinders trying to frame shots through the murk. But the result absolutely justified the suffering. Blade Runner's world feels thick, humid, and oppressive in ways few films have ever achieved. Number 16. Many extras were brought from punk clubs. To populate the chaotic street scenes with authentic energy, casting directors hit Los Angeles punk clubs, goth hangouts, and underground venues. They recruited real bikers, club kids, street performers, and counterculture regulars, people who already looked like they'd survived an apocalypse. No extensive costuming needed. These weren't traditional Hollywood extras reciting directions. They brought genuine unpredictability to every scene. Watch the background carefully. Those aren't performances. That's documentation. The production captured a specific moment in LA's underground culture, preserving it accidentally like insects in amber. That rawness makes the future feel lived in and real. Number 17. A deleted scene revealed. Deckard had an ex-wife. In the original script and theatrical cut narration, Deckard mentions a failed marriage. There was even a filmed scene showing him visiting his ex-wife, discussing their relationship's collapse and what went wrong between them. It provided backstory, humanized Deckard, explained his cynicism, and why he seemed so emotionally detached from the world around him. The scene gave context to his loneliness, his drinking, his reluctance to connect with anyone. On paper, it made perfect sense. Give the protagonist depth, show the audience why he is the way he is. Ridley Scott cut it entirely for the director's cut and final cut versions, believing it diluted the focus on Deckard and Rachel's developing relationship. He realized that explaining Deckard's past actually weakened his present. The excision works brilliantly. We don't need to know Deckard's romantic history to understand his isolation. Mystery serves character better than exposition. Sometimes the best editing decision is complete deletion, the courage to throw away filmed material that cost thousands of dollars and days of work. That entire subplot vanished, and the film became stronger for the absence. Deckard arrives as a cipher, a man with no visible past, making his connection with Rachel, another person with manufactured memories, even more powerful. They're both lost souls searching for something real in a world of illusions. The deleted ex-wife would have anchored Deckard too firmly in conventional humanity, when the film's genius lies in keeping us uncertain about who he really is. Number 18. Sid Mead designed vehicles that actually worked. Legendary industrial designer Sid Mead didn't just create pretty concept art. His vehicle designs for Blade Runner included detailed mechanical specifications, how engines would function, how weight distribution would work, how controls would operate. He approached every design as if these vehicles would actually be built and driven. Mead came from industrial design, not Hollywood, so he thought practically first, aesthetically second. This grounded approach gave Blade Runner's technology believable substance. When you see those police spinners, you believe they could fly because every detail suggests real engineering. Form follows function, even in science fiction, especially in science fiction. Number 19. The spinner cars needed 3 different versions. Those flying police cars, spinners, required multiple builds for different purposes. One full-size practical vehicle for street driving scenes with working wheels and basic controls. One with a lifting mechanism for shots where it appears to take off, using cranes and hydraulics. And one detailed miniature for aerial sequences, filmed against blue screen and miniature cityscapes. Each version cost hundreds of thousands of $1982. Harrison Ford actually sat in the practical version for ground-level shots, feeling every bump and turn. The seamless integration of these 3 versions convinced audiences these vehicles existed. Practical effects demand commitment, but the payoff is tangible reality on screen. Number 20. Early audiences hated the movie. Here's the brutal truth. When Blade Runner premiered in June 1982, audiences rejected it almost completely. They found it too slow, too dark, too confusing. The theatrical release featured that despised narration and tacked-on happy ending because test screenings had been disasters. Critics offered mixed reviews at best. The film opened the same summer as E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Steven Spielberg's warm, optimistic alien story. Audiences chose hope over dystopia. Blade Runner earned only $40 million domestically against a $28 million budget. It was considered a failure, but home video saved it. VHS rentals introduced millions to Scott's vision. Slowly, over years, the film's reputation transformed. By the 1990s, it had become the most influential science fiction film ever made, reshaping cyberpunk, inspiring countless imitators, and proving that sometimes audiences need time to catch up with genius. Blade Runner taught Hollywood that vision matters more than immediate success. Those 20 secrets reveal a production where every detail, improvised or planned, contributed to something revolutionary. If you missed these hidden layers, hit subscribe for more forgotten film history that changed cinema forever.